In this lesson, we're going to look at the WordPress configuration file, which we just created automatically using the WordPress installer. We're going to have a quick look at what's in there, what might need to change at some point, and some extra features you can enable there, namely auto update. So let's go ahead and connect to our virtual private server, our server out on the internet. Go ahead and SSH there, enter your password when you're prompted. Once you're logged in, just to orient you again, the customary place to put web files is in var www. However, we haven't put them there since we're sort of planning a WordPress hosting platform that is a multi-user system where different user accounts can log themselves in and administer their own website files. We've put them in the home directories. So our system user for our website is named Tutorial Linux. So we're heading over to Home, Tutorial Linux, that user's home directory, and I'll just show you what's in there. The logs directory and the public HTML directory. So if we can say list logs, and it's actually empty right now, but if there are any Nginx errors or any PHP FPM errors, they'll go into a file here. And our website files are actually in public HTML, the public HTML directory. The reason we're setting it up this way is that this is a very common layout for a hosting company. So if you go work for a hosting company as a level, let's say level 1 or level 2 system administrator, you'll be working a lot with this sort of directory layout, where users have homes, and those homes contain those users' websites, log directories, and public HTML directories. So these are the actual files that are part of our WordPress install. The most important file here is the wp-config.php file. We're going to look at that in a second, but just to cover this, our core directories for WordPress are the wp-admin directory, and that directory contains the admin backend for your WordPress site. The WP content directory, which contains, we can list it out, it contains themes, any uploads that you've added to the site, plugins, and that sort of thing. And you've got the WP includes directory, which is sort of the core application files for WordPress. Together, these three are your WordPress core. Let's say you have a broken or hacked WordPress install. You can actually just replace the WP admin and the WP includes directory with a brand new directory or brand new directories from the most up-to-date version. And that's a way of making sure that your core files are clean and they're the default unmodified files. This is especially useful after a security incident. The WP content directory can't be replaced so easily because user themes, customizations, plugins, and uploads, most of all, are kept in here. Now, the actual content of the site is kept in the database. So post and page content, user accounts, other things like that, they're all in the database, that is in MySQL. They're not actually stored in a file anywhere. But again, WP content is the most important directory here. You can pretty much delete everything else and survive, but this will nuke a user's site unless you've got a backup somewhere. Okay, that said, let's have a look at that core config file. So we're going to use the less command again, wp config.php. When you hit enter, Q to exit, I'm just going to scroll up and down using the arrow keys right now. So let's have a quick look. There is some documentation here, so it's fairly simple to see, but just remember that really when you're changing any settings, this is where you're doing it. So you've got a database name, Tutorial Linux, a database password, which we randomly generated from dev urandom, our MySQL, our database host here, defined as localhost because we're simply running the database on the same server as our application. This implies that we can split out the database, right? Run it on a different host, for example, a database cluster. Character set, collate, not that interesting. Here are the salts and keys. This is sort of a little bit of random information, so the application has something to seed itself with, some secret values to use. This is for any cryptographic or hashing functions. These will be used. Yours need to be unique, obviously, and after a security compromise, you'll want to change these out, should that happen. By the time you see this WordPress site won't be running anymore, so good luck attacking a non-existent server. Table prefix, if you remember during the installer, this is where the installer asked you if you wanted to run multiple WordPress instances on the same database to prevent conflicting table names. A default install will use the WP underscore prefix. So for example, the users table will be called WP underscore users. And if you're running multiple WordPress installs on a single database, then you can just change these out for the other ones. So every WordPress install will have a unique table prefix, and that allows you to have many WordPress installs. This is really sort of a leftover from the days when computers and servers specifically were very resource constrained, and like running an extra database or spinning up an extra database for a user was like hard. So hosting companies would really limit this, and they'd be like, oh, one database per user, and this was sort of the cheat for running multiple web applications on a single database then. It's not such a big deal now because most hosting accounts that you can have will have many, many databases available to you, like usually 100 or something like that. It's just not as much of an issue anymore. For something like what we're doing, which is actually setting up a WordPress install and a hosting platform on a virtual private server, a VM somewhere out on the internet, this is a non-issue because we have complete root access to our server and we can install MySQL and have as many databases as we'd like. We're constrained only by our virtual machine's CPU, RAM, and disk speed. Okay, now we've almost reached the end here. This is an important one. WP debug is set to false. If I set this to true, I'll show you what happens in a second, but it will give us debugging information. You definitely don't want to leave this turned on, but it can help you during a troubleshooting process if something's gone wrong on the site. Often it'll be plugin related. You install a plugin and things stop working. Well, turning on WP debug can be a really easy way to get a handle on what's happening and exactly where things are failing. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on WP debug. We're just going to edit this with nano, search for debug, and change this to true. So we've now turned on WP debug, and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I've gone ahead and done something devious. I have edited one of the theme source files and inserted some extra text that will throw an error. Turning debug on, you can see when I try to load the site, I get a fatal error here. And this helps me troubleshoot what's going on here. Call to undefined function, get foobar header in this file. You can see the tracks that my devious actions have left here. But basically I just added some extra text here. And we can remove that again. This is the WordPress get header function. And when we reload here, we should get a nice site again. Our theme works again and everything works. Now, okay, I admit this is a really contrived example that was actually a fatal error. Debugging errors will look slightly different. But the point is, debugging and turning on debugging in your config file can really help you track down problems. We're going to go ahead and turn that off again by just doing a backwards search with Control-R, nano, WP config, that's the one we want. We'll head down to the debugging option and set that to false again. These are true and false literals, so no quotes around these, just true and false lowercase. There's one last option I'd like to show you. So this is PHP code. Don't worry too much about the comment syntax here, but we're just going to say auto update. This is the default. Define WP auto update core false. So we're defining this thing as being false. What false means, there's three values this can have: true, false, or minor. This is really just configuring the auto update capability that WordPress has. That is, without any interaction from you, it will perform updates in the background. False turns it off completely. True gives you development updates, minor core updates, and major core updates. So that is minor versions, going from 3.1 to 3.2, major updates going from 3 to 4, which can break some things, so it can be a little bit dangerous, and development updates, which are smaller updates. So true is something you can do, but I would recommend against it if you're trying to run something with as much stability as you can. Using the minor option, this will give you the minor updates, so going from, let's say, 4.0 to WordPress 4.1, which in my life working with WordPress, I don't think I've ever seen that really break anything. This is sort of the safest option, which will also include by default security updates, because security updates are pushed as minor versions, no matter which version you're on. So the minor versions will basically get rid of the headache that you've got constantly checking, have there been any WordPress security vulnerabilities? Do I need to update all my websites? Do I need to push out emails to my users that are running sites on my server? If you're doing it manually, obviously, do I need to log into 15 sites and run the updater? This will get rid of that problem, and any updates you make can really just be a calm, relaxed, intentional upgrade to either another major version or whatever else you need to do. So again, I recommend having defined WP Auto Update Core minor. That is with quotes around it. So go ahead and save this, Control X, Y to save, and then Enter to save as that file. And we'll just reload the site. I'm paranoid, nothing could have happened just now, but many times that I've said that, something has happened. So reload the site again to make sure everything is still loading, that we haven't introduced any syntax errors into our config file. Whenever you edit some site files, just always reload the site a couple times to make sure you kind of clear your cache on your browser, make sure you're seeing everything the way it really is right now. Being logged in actually helps because that turns off caching. We're not caching anything for logged in users. So you can be assured that if you're logged in and hitting Control R to reload the site, you are actually seeing the real current state of the site. So that's about it. In this lesson, we've covered really the basics that you need to know from the sysadmin side for working with the WordPress core files and core configuration file. The WP config.php file is your core configuration file. You can change options there. The debug option will be the most interesting to you probably. Defining auto updates is also convenient. The last thing in the WP config.php file that's of interest is it contains your database login information. So the database name, host name, username, and password. Those things are all fairly important. If you have some sort of security policy, you'll see this at larger sites where you've got many websites running. You may have a process where every 6 months or so, you generate new database passwords. Well, when you do that, the WP config.php file is where you update that database password. We've also taken a quick look at what the WordPress application actually looks like on the file system. You've got your 3 core directories, 2 of which are the core application directories, and the third contains user-modified content. That is, the WP content directory contains all the plugins, theme files, and other modifications that a user might have made, including picture and file uploads. WP admin, WP includes, and all the small files at the top level of your application, obviously with the exception of your config file, can be deleted and restored from the latest WordPress version just from a download whenever you really want. So the sacred things which you must carefully back up and never really touch are WP content and WP config. That really has all the state that the application has. Everything else is just application files. Okay, you've got basic sysadmin chops for running a WordPress site on a server. I'll see you in the next lesson.